The sun was setting on the isolated hill of iSandlwana when Frederick Augustus Thesiger, better known as Lord Chelmsford, arrived back on the hill with his men on January 22, 1879. The arrogant, overconfident, and full of himself general was sure of an easy victory against the tribesmen of Zulu, but the sight at his camp horrified him on return. A night ago, he had moved out to lay a surprise attack on the approaching Zulu forces, but he returned empty-handed to a shocking scenery. "But I left 1,000 men to guard the camp," he uttered in disbelief, for he was welcomed by the sight of his men, bared and unrecognizable among the broken bags of tea and sugar, the burnt fabric of tents, and wrecked weapons and furniture. The Zulus had just handed the Imperial British Army their worst defeat in history. Welcome to Nutty History. Today, we're going to look back at the Battle of iSandlwana, the creepy history of the greatest British battle. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as some of this video may be offensive or disturbing. We, the makers of this video, in no way support or condone the actions of the subjects featured. After his dear friend and then High Commissioner for South Africa, Henry Bartle Frere, issued a list of outrageous demands to King Cetshwayo, the monarch of the Zulu kingdom, Lord Chelmsford became the commander-in-chief of the British invasion force in South Africa. Most important of all demands, Frere wanted the Zulu kingdom to demilitarize. But naturally, that was unacceptable for the Zulu, who knew how the British would respond to that. The force assembled by Chelmsford was impressive. He gathered 18,000 troops consisting of redcoats, volunteers, and African auxiliaries, and stationed them along the border with the Zulu kingdom to invade as soon as possible. Chelmsford was highly overconfident that the tribesmen would be no match for superior English warfare technology and prowess. Chelmsford and nearly 4,000 to 5,000 men left the British colony of Natal on January 6, 1879, and marched into Zululand, and they managed to find very little resistance for the first 2 weeks. Chelmsford crossed the Buffalo River at a mission station called Rorke's Drift and advanced unopposed to iSandlwana. They made camp at the hill, a lion-shaped outcrop, on January 20th. Strategically, it was a perfect outlook spot over the surrounding valleys. 2 days later, at 2 a.m., Chelmsford heard whispers about Zulu planning an attack, and soon it was confirmed. Roughly 12 miles from the camp, a strong Zulu force was gathering near Mangini Falls. Hoping to surprise the enemy instead, Chelmsford took half the men and headed out to ambush the Zulu impi. His subordinates, Pulliaine and Dunford, took charge of the rest of the men at the camp. The Zulus were, in fact, in no hurry to battle, as the 22nd was the new moon and was considered inauspicious in their culture to be a day for battle. So they wanted to wait until the day would pass. But when the news of being spotted by English spies reached them, they had no option but to attack. They managed to outmaneuver Chelmsford and charged at iSandlwana with an army of 20,000 strong. Using the chest and horn formation that was invented by King Shaka during his time, they dashed toward iSandlwana, armed with spears and old-fashioned muskets that they barely knew how to use. Brits at the other camp, on the other hand, had contemporary modern weaponry. The beginning of the Zulu attack went exactly as Brits assumed it would go. The Zulu warriors were dropping like fresh fruit in a strong wind with every British volley. But a brief delay in replenishing ammunition supply was all the time the Zulu impi needed to gain the upper hand, and when the opportunity showed up, they pounced on the British like hungry tigers. Throughout the battle, as long as the British were able to keep Zulus at arm's length, the battles were easy. But when and if Zulus got close enough to engage in hand-to-hand combat, as it happened in iSandlwana, Brits were no better than sitting ducks. This trend would continue throughout the entire Anglo-Zulu battle. Zulus were death incarnate with assegais in their hand if they got close enough. And though they suffered 1,000 casualties and 2,000 of them were wounded, when Chelmsford returned to camp, he found 858 white men and 471 black men who were fighting for the Brits non-responsive. The number of non-Zulu survivors of iSandlwana was only 350, making iSandlwana the most harrowing defeat for the British during the Victorian era. During the Victorian age, the British Empire was at the height of its power, strength, and geographical reach. After the failure of the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 in India, the only winner of the conflict was the British Empire. It took over control of India from the East India Company. The company was hurt beyond repair, despite managing to suppress the rebellion. Also, Indian states had lost the golden chance of escaping the dreaded claws of imperialism. With India officially added to Queen Victoria's crown, Britain became the largest and mightiest empire to ever exist on Earth, covering around a quarter of the Earth's land surface and ruling over 458 million people. It was pretty much like the real-life version of the Risk, where one crucial territory could be the decider and all of the players give up. Britain was riding the high, and its expansion was only fueling its ambitions. They were happy to grab any land that could reap profits. Throughout the decade of the 1870s, the British only controlled the coastline of South Africa, and the interior belonged to the Dutch-speaking settlers known as Boers, who were predominantly farmers. In between the interiors and the coastline was the scattered region belonging to various native tribes, among which the Zulu was the dominant one. The Zulu kingdom was formed in 1816 with the ascension of Shaka Zulu, but under the influence of their prominent leader, the tribe quickly earned the reputation of being a capable, dynamic, and formidable military power. One by one, the Zulu assimilated other tribes on their own or subjugated them and had become a menace for the Boers. The British weren't much interested in the interiors of southern Africa until the discovery of diamonds in 1867 made it a very lucrative prospect. Lord Chelmsford had a decorated career in the military and had proved his worth in India. After being promoted to Major General in 1877, he was appointed to command British forces in the Cape Colony. He had experience fighting the Xhosa, and he had formed a low opinion about the capabilities of African soldiers for obvious reasons, that he was an imperialist and a white middle-aged man. He wasn't alone in this endeavor, fortunately or unfortunately. The former governor of Bombay, Henry Bartle Frere, was now High Commissioner for South Africa, and he wanted to turn all of South Africa into a federation of British colonies. Not only were the Boers against the idea, but Zulus outright threw the British demands into the sea. This gave Lord Chelmsford the excuse to invade Zulu territories. Shocked to find out how much he underestimated the African tribe, Chelmsford was forced to retreat out of Zululand. Meanwhile, another Zulu army, 3,000 to 4,000 men strong, had attacked the British garrison at Rorke's Drift. The garrison had hardly 150 men, and 4 of them were civilians. However, the British at the garrison had a harder resolve, and despite being dazed and bruised, they stood their ground all night. 17 British soldiers perished and 15 were wounded, while the Zulus lost 351 warriors and about 500 were wounded without gaining an inch. Dejected, the Zulus left the early morning of January 23rd. The English media used Rorke's Drift as a cover-up for the embarrassment at iSandlwana, but the authorities knew the defeat had to be avenged. Veteran unit reinforcements sailed to Zululand from nearby India, where they had been fighting the Second Afghan battle. On March 28th, the British felt another blow at Lobane. Colonel Buller's regiment was surprised by the sudden appearance of a huge Zulu impi, and 90 Europeans and 100 African auxiliaries lost their lives during the chaotic retreat. The very next day, Zulu attacked Evelyn Wood's entrenched positions at Kambula. Only 2,000 men on the Imperial British side were up against 20,000 Zulus, but the British had learned their lesson at iSandlwana. With proper defenses, they kept Zulus at arm's length and the tribe forces were routed. With 2,000 Zulu deceased, it broke their morale. For the British, there were just 29 deceased and 54 wounded. Lord Chelmsford got his revenge at Jingjinlovu, where he attacked the Zulu siege of Isho and managed to send 1,200 Zulus to their maker, while the British lost only 2. Until iSandlwana happened, the British government had zero ideas what Frere and Chelmsford had done in South Africa, and after learning of the Anglo-Zulu War, the Prime Minister of Britain, Benjamin Disraeli, was strongly against it. Yet Chelmsford and Frere continued the war. In June, Chelmsford was racing against time, as British authorities had decided to replace him with Sir Garnet Wolseley. Desperate, he marched his forces right into the heart of Zululand at their capital, Ulundi, with his trump card, a Gatling gun. Half an hour of sustained artillery and Gatling fire was enough to break the Zulu resolve, and the battle ended quickly where 1,500 Zulu perished. With the war over, the British divided the Zulu into 13 tribes, so they would keep squabbling among themselves and never be strong enough to challenge their British overlords. The Anglo-Zulu battle was over, and so was the Zulu kingdom. South Africa had to wait 126 years to have a Zulu as its leader again. Thanks for watching Nutty History. If you enjoyed the video, please like and share, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to catch more nutty videos of human history.